You're listening to the Served Up Show, a podcast that features inspiring beverage professionals and topic experts that share their passions through meaningful content. Your hostesses, Bridget Albert, is best known as the Market Fresh Mixologist, an industry mentor with over 25 years of experience. And I'm Julie Milroy, best known for my passion for leading change and helping others grow in their careers. Grab a cocktail and sit back. Let's learn how we can make a positive impact in our industry.
Hey y'all, it's Bridget here. I'm really excited today to welcome Roberto Sequeira, the visionary founder of Gläce Luxury Ice, to the show. Roberto is the driving force behind the inception of Gläce Luxury Ice, the groundbreaking company that redefines how we perceive this essential cocktail element. Gläce Luxury Ice stands out as the very first luxury ice company, reshaping the landscape of mixology by emphasizing the significance of ice in crafting the perfect drink. Roberto's journey is a testament to his unwavering commitment to enhancing the drinking experience. As we dive into his story, we'll uncover the secrets behind his innovative approach and why ice holds such a pivotal role in cocktail craftsmanship. So sit back, relax, grab yourself your favorite cocktail over luxury ice, and enjoy this really interesting episode. Roberto, welcome to Served Up. I am so happy to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to see you. It's been so many years since sort of the journey began, and I've been the luckiest person for having met you early on. So thank you.
Well, I feel the same about you, Roberto, and I'm very excited to share your story with our listeners. So with that said, can you tell our listeners a bit about yourself, your background, and what really brought you into the world of ice?
Oh, ice and spirits and hospitality and all things cocktails. Yeah, I think, it's always hard to think of yourself as being interesting. Let me see if I can do my best. I was born and raised in Nicaragua, small third world country. I came to the United States when I was, 14, 15 years old. I didn't speak a word of English. And I just sort of made my way through, like most people that come to America and find their way. I ended up going to the Fresno State University for undergrad with an engineering degree. And then a few years after building a lot of infrastructure projects like highways and dams and pipelines, I ended up at UCLA for an MBA. So I have an MBA from UCLA. It was while I was at UCLA that the idea came for what has now become Gläce Luxury Ice. And so that is interesting because unlike a lot of folks who sort of came up through hospitality, bar backing, bartending, eventually brand ambassadoring, and some have grown on to build their own brands personally and otherwise. I sort of came in through a different angle, so to speak. So my passion for this space was otherwise. So if I was to start at the beginning, I had no idea that I was going to end up in the ice world or the ice business, let alone the cocktail world, the cocktail business or hospitality. What I had was always an inkling of wanting to be an entrepreneur. And I wasn't really sure in what space. And like a lot of people that come to the United States without a big bankroll, I had to do it somewhere or in a space where I could afford to do it. So even though I may have had this great idea to build a rocket company, unlike Mr. Musk, I couldn't just go out there and start building a rocket company, right? So I had a class at UCLA with a great professor, Professor Abe, called Venture Initiation. And a group of us got together and we decided to study all consumer packaged goods to see if there was any space that had not been improved upon, so to speak. And we looked at all kinds of things. We looked at wine, spirits, shoes, watches, eyeglasses, makeup, clothing, cars, you name it. Eventually, we settled on looking at the bottled water market. And we're like, there's a wall of bottled waters, all different brands, all clear, all different sizes, but we still have these gigantic preferences. And then a friend of mine said, hey, what about ice? There's ice boxes all over the world. Every one of them says ice. And we thought, that's interesting. Tell me more. So we realized that the consumer packaged ice market, what I like to call generic ice, was a $4 billion annual industry in North America alone. All at about, back then in 2007, $3 to $4 a bag. So it's a huge amount of volume, right? And we thought, geez, why has no one looked at this? Seems odd. Maybe no one's been crazy enough to try to brand ice. And so I thought, well, why not us? That number was impressive enough to completely bowl us over. And then that number got bigger because then we realized that every hospitality outlet made their own. And back then it was all about the ice machine and the battle between one brand versus the other and which one makes what kind and is it better or worse for you, right? So we looked at it and we looked at it hard. And so I started by definition or by necessity going deep into, okay, so who uses ice? Why do they use it? Why is ice important? If no one's scared up until now, why should they care going forward? And I'm a firm believer in the rising tide raises all ships. And so back in 2007, it was really the early-ish years of the cocktail movement revolution. So everything was coming up and people were becoming much more aware of the importance of ingredients in drinks. Bartenders were beginning to step out from behind the bar, becoming ambassadors. People have paid more attention to the ingredients, right? Which is an interesting journey because a similar thing had happened to chefs. Chefs had been back of house people who would once in a while come out front, tour their tables, and go back. However, the bartender was a little bit different. The bartender was not so much back of house. The bartender was accustomed to being the star of the show. And that would be something that would come in to play later on as I continue to build a brand, because it wasn't something that I intuitively knew at the time. I just knew that, I was like, well, this will make sense. Same way that it makes sense to chefs. Chefs will source their ingredients. Bartenders should want to do the same. And that was a tough lesson for me to learn really early on because it was not intuitive for me to understand that difference in personality. Alas, we launched this little brand that nobody had ever heard of. I needed something that was trademarkable and that was difficult to say. And I'll share the story with you because I think I used to think it was funny, but it's also true, more importantly. So there was a movie back then, a classic piece of American cinema, a classic for all times. I don't know if you've seen it, called Showgirls.
I've seen Showgirls. Oh my God.
Yeah,
and now it is a cult classic.
It is, right?
It is now. Yes.
I don't know if you remember, Bridget. Showgirls was about a girl who comes up in her profession and suddenly she finds herself among the well-to-do. And she goes shopping in Las Vegas. She buys herself a beautiful dress and everyone tells her how great she looks. And she goes, it's a Versace. And everybody that is in the know, snickers behind her back. She goes, look at the new girl, right? Little did she know, Versace. I thought it was hilarious. So in creating the brand, I said, I want a brand that nobody knows how to say it except for me. I will make it so that those that know understand that it's pronounced gloss, like lip gloss, and not glacé or glacé or whatever, right? So I added these two dots over the letter A called umlauts, which have become very popular. But back then, nobody knew what they were called. And the Gläce Luxury Ice brand was born out of my little Nicaraguan brain, just understanding that there was a $4 billion opportunity there just waiting to be segmented.
Really amazing. So it's such a unique product. Like, you really explained it so beautifully because there wasn't anything like it back then. And bartenders were just starting to pay attention to their ingredients in such a thoughtful way. I feel like we're very spoiled in hospitality now when it comes to ingredients, and especially knowing and understanding the ingredients because there is so many resources out there to educate yourself versus in the early, even as recently as the early 2000s. So can you take the listeners from that point, from really creating Gläce Luxury Ice, and take us on that journey from then to where you are today?
Absolutely. So I started showing up places and having conversations about ice. And the number one answer was, what are you talking about? What do you mean? I have ice. Here it is. Then I would say, well, have you thought about it? They're like, nope, never thought about it. Well, what about if they did this? They're like, yeah, man, I don't know what you're talking about. This is what we do. This is what we use. And back then, the fancy places were using different brands of ice machines. And it was the early times when different ice machines were, for lack of a better word, purchasing the influence of certain big players. So I had endless meetings with lots and lots of people. And they were like, yeah, sorry, I don't have time for you because this here big ice machine company wants me to put this ice machine in every bar that I'm consulting for. So yeah, about that. And so there was, I don't know, I mean, we've been around since 2007. So you figure out that's been like 17 years. So let's just block the story out in 5-year blocks, right? So for 5 years, it was like, you're crazy. Ice is ice. I have no need for this. Then the following 5 years, oh yeah, we have thought about ice. We bought this machine, so we don't need you. Okay, fantastic. And then the third stage or the third epoch of that was like, now we're trying to make our own. Watch me lose my fingertip, spend 4 hours in prep, have difficulty with quality control. Oh, by the way, I'm still using tap. So the journey that I'm going to try to distill for you, I'm going to distill 17 years of the evolution of ice. And I think you did an episode of careers have been built on how to talk to people in the pursuit of what is only one of the pillars of perfection, which is clarity. So there's folks that have built an entire career trying to talk to people on how to make a clear piece of ice. And at the end, it was still unattainable. You could just make a bigger piece of cloudy ice and you have to cut out the part that had impurities in it and bubbles. And so the difficult of that was having solved that from the beginning, but having to walk the customer, the industry, the players into what has become eventually, finally, I think, and we're probably still 5 years away, a belief in what is otherwise intuitive in other categories, which is brand. You know, I can't tell you the number of places where I go in and I'll be like, I'll take a vodka soda. And somehow reflexively, the people behind the bar, endless bartenders, will suggest, you know, either the brand that they've been trained or accustomed to or their favorite one. And that mind share is enormous. That has unbelievable value, right? And our goal has always been to build that same mind share in the ice space. So in the beginning, there was that. We had to have those conversations, educate everybody coming up. I was like, hey, watch this. It's, you know, and then it was 3 years of conversations about size, another 3 years of conversations about shape, another 3 years of conversations about purity and clarity, another 3 years. And you know, our product hasn't changed. We're literally moving the same product that we started with 17 years ago, but the conversations today at the events are completely different than the ones we had, you know, back in the day, which has been fascinating.
Well, what are those conversations? Yeah. What do those conversations look like today versus?
Right. So here I am, the most fortunate guy in the world who gets to do what he loves for a living. And you've invited me to share with you sort of the passion that has been the creation of this brand. And so the American Distilled Spirits Council, I think DISCUS, has shown that luxury brand index has grown, I think 21% is the 5-year growth trend, 21% tequila and 19% of whiskey. The luxury spirits volumes have grown in 2021, 143%, and in 2022, 141%. So I mention this because we've always known from the beginning what kind of brand we wanted to build. So we're not building an exclusionary brand, but we knew that every consumer packaged good has a brand and a customer segment that they were going to target. And we knew that we wanted to be in a certain segment. So very early on, when we didn't have any money to advertise and we didn't have any money to promote and we didn't have any money for free sweatshirts or trips to, fancy places, we had to depend on what's called editorial content. People who saw us, who recognized that there was something there. And we had to take a lot of arrows for that, including a 20-minute segment by Stephen Colbert, who just fully roasted, right? He was like, oh my God, can you guys believe that this company is selling ice for more than 50 cents? Like, it was mind-boggling. Luckily, at the time, I had a colleague who used to work for one of the big networks. And she was like, oh my God, Roberto. She goes, what Stephen Colbert just did for you for free. She goes, people will pay millions of dollars for. And I was like, okay, because it still hurts, but I don't know if that's supposed to make me feel better. But he crashed our website. We grew. We were then all of a sudden, Gloss became the top end brand in the category. And so, there's no growth without lumps, but this one was a huge one. We have been the default high end watermark brand in the category, and no one has touched us since. There's still, since I launched now, there's probably hundreds of people who are out there trying to make specialty ice, which is fantastic. I applaud them. They all have found out firsthand how difficult it is. But we've been the only brand builders, I think, from the beginning, which has been challenging because it's required discipline for us. We've had plenty of opportunity to branch out, and we refuse to do so because I believe in the power of branding. And so, based on the research, you look at the premiumization, for example, since we're talking about, sort of nerdy metrics of category. According to Discus, 61% of total revenue is accounted for by high-end or super premium spirits. For me, that's a very significant number. So if we can provide a turnkey solution to any hospitality operator to have a differentiated serve and capture more of that and grow that pie, then we win. And I think the challenge has always been that ice has been something that everybody aspires to, but they're all willing to just somehow not account for it as a driver of revenue. And we've always disagreed with that. It is not an overhead expense. It is not part of your prep. It's not something that you put in time in. It could be very much a revenue capturer and a revenue grower, and one that, just like you go through the trouble of having particular brands on your top shelf. If you didn't believe in the top shelf, you'd only have one shelf. But that's not how the industry operates. And that's what we're after. We're after that Snake River Farm salmon is that for a reason. It's not just salmon. And educating the consumer, and more importantly, educating the bartender who ends up in these leadership positions to have that click moment in their head. That is where we have been, I think, successful, and eternally grateful for folks like you and Kyle and Debbie Peak and all these other folks who I was so fortunate to meet many, many, many years ago by happenstance. And we work with brands who have embraced us, who have chosen to invest in us, having had a cheaper, quote unquote, or equal, they choose Gloss. And for that, we are grateful. And I think that has proven to be a worthwhile investment for them, because, we're birds of a feather, so to speak. We're not just random. It elevates their serve as well.
It's really fun, talking about ice as an ingredient for a cocktail or really any beverage, right?
Yeah.
That you want to have at a certain temperature, and glass really gives it that edge, that perfect ice cube. And when you talk about cutting down on your prep, oh my God, and all the energy that it takes to make those perfect spheres or whatever you're trying to do, it just makes perfect sense. So with that said, what is your favorite serve with Gläce?
I couldn't have said it better than your efforts. So there are cocktail ingredients, and this as a cocktail creator, that obsess over a quarter ounce ingredient or a sprinkle of this. And generically, ice becomes 25% of your drink. So for us, it made very little sense to leave a quarter of your volume of your drink up to chance. So if you're not controlling for that, right, you're really, the rest doesn't matter. I'm a huge fan of these world's most expensive cocktails recipes. They're like, oh, here's our ultimate margarita. And I'm like, that's fantastic. I'm glad that you followed all of that. And they're like, you can get it on the rocks. And I was like, have you tested Las Vegas water lately? Have you seen what California water district has allowed to be present in your ingredients? And so we wanted to perfect that. We wanted to be another ingredient choice for cocktail creators. So for me, simply, and I'm a big fan of getting rid of sugar in our lives. So for me, the ideal serve is simply a spirit that has been crafted, balanced, packaged, and delivered to the specifications of the master distiller that may benefit from maximum chilling and minimal dilution. That to me is the holy grail of experiences, because by the time a spirit makes it into the bottle, it has been balanced exquisitely. And my idea was simple: 1.5 ounces or 2 of that spirit over a perfectly dimensionally piece of ice with absolute zero taste or smell is the ideal example and experience of that drink as the master distiller intended it to be. Personally. Having said that, let's see if we can do what I like to call the experience. Each one of our pieces is individually wrapped, elegantly packaged in metal tins.
So that's how they arrive to your client.
Absolutely. So to a clean, perfect tumbler, we want to add a single piece of Gläce Luxury Ice. And then, in my case, I'm enjoying a delicious Tapatio Añejo by a friend and fellow entrepreneur here in Northern California. And that allows me to have the perfect serve.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And for those who have never considered, really changing up even, their cocktails, either at, if they own a bar or if they're a bartender, or even we get a lot of consumers that are just simply curious about our industry that tune in. The importance of ice is exactly what Roberto said. It's 25% of the serve itself. So it is important to pay attention to it. It is important not to go so cheap on it and to really, take thoughtful care in your ice, just as you would with the other ingredients that you put into the cocktail. So, I've always been on board with Gläce. I think that it's amazing what you've been able to do over the years and we continue to offer. Can you tell our listeners where they can find Gläce Ice?
The easiest place to find us is on the web. All social media, it's exactly the same, which is Gläce Luxury Ice, GLACE LUXURY ICE. That works for Facebook, that works for Instagram, that works for Twitter, and on our website as well. And our business is probably 90% direct to consumer. We have a small 10% hospitality side to it. As you can imagine, and as I'm sure you're well aware, the exercise in the previous pandemic brought that particular business to zero. And we're happy to say that it's, coming back every year. It returns a little bit more and more as people have now re-entered sort of and are looking for these new experiences and return to sort of the regular world. So that's fantastic. I think that when we designed the brand and even now, our COVID project was the changing of our packaging. So now, we started with these resealable pouches that had an air valve and removed all contaminants so that you could keep it in your freezer and it wouldn't smell like, the soup from last month or your fish. And so what we've done now is we've upgraded to each one of our ice pieces, in addition to being dimensionally and perfectly clear. Each one is individually wrapped and sealed. Then we take 5 of those pieces and then we put them in a sleek metal can that's capped. And so there is certainty in the safety of your product. That piece of ice, that ice plug didn't get delivered to the back alley. It didn't get dragged on the floor. It wasn't handled by dirty hands. It didn't fall before it went into the freezer. So the customer can feel secure, sure, and safe of the serve. But we also didn't want to stop there. We wanted to make sure that the bartender, that the operator had a way to differentiate the serve, to let everyone know at the bar that this is a special drink. So we wanted these cans to be able to stand alone behind the bar and join their best friends, which is all the different bottles, right? We didn't want to take a lot of space. We know that that's valuable real estate, but we wanted to say, hey, look, there it is. There's the gloss can. I know that Pappy's is not going to be Pappy's on the rocks. It'll be Pappy's over gloss. And there'll be Pappy's over gloss at this bar. And there'll be Pappy's on the gloss at the bar across the street. But more importantly, it'll be Pappy's on the glass when I get home. And that ingredient, that drink list, that ingredient list, that experience will be exactly the same. And that is what we're after. We're after that replicable experience around the world, which I think is an unbelievable value proposition for multi-outlet operators. My God, they all buy the same linens. It's the same soap in the shower. Guess what? The same ice at every bar, that same high-end vodka, that same high-end mixer, that same high-end ice. And the promise then to our customers, both hospitality and retail, is quality. We want you to be happy every single time.
Wow, what a great message. What advice do you have, Roberto, for folks that are really longing to be entrepreneurs, just getting their careers really started, and maybe have some truly out of the box ideas like you had years ago with ice?
I think the best thing I could say to young Roberto is be prepared to never work as hard for little or negative money. Entrepreneurship is hard. Entrepreneurship is difficult. Entrepreneurship requires for you to believe in yourself more so than anybody else believes in you. And it 100% requires you to put your money where your beliefs are, because you will lose a lot of money first before anything. You'll be made fun of by your best friends first. You'll be turned down by everyone first. But having said that, I always share this story. There was a man who everybody knows. His name was Henry Ford. And can you imagine when he started his company, he said, I'm going to build a car. Do you want it? And at that time, everyone had horses and no one had roads. And Henry Ford said, here's a car. And I was like, why do I want that? They're like, well, it goes fast. And he goes, I don't have anywhere to drive it. There are no roads. There are no gas stations. It's complicated and it's expensive. My horse makes more horses in the off season. You don't make more cars. So by every definition of entrepreneurship, Henry Ford shouldn't have sold a single car because the world wasn't ready for cars. And yet here we are. No one who Henry Ford is, who decided to sell cars to people who didn't need cars. They already had horses. I can take my horse over that hill to go see my neighbor. Can I take your car over there? He goes, well, if it's dry and there's not a lot of rut and you have gas and hopefully it works. Oh, by the way, I have to teach you how to do it as well. So hard doesn't mean impossible. Hard just means you have to really believe. And I think the second thing that I think is equally as important as number one to any entrepreneurs is you have to have stick-to-itiveness. You have to be willing to grind for what you believe in. Depending how young everybody listening is, we all know Uber and Lyft. Well, I have news for you guys. Prior to that, there was taxi.com, but the world wasn't ready. People didn't believe in getting into a stranger's car for money and being driven places. Culturally, we just weren't there. And that's kind of what I think about every time I was like, well, I used to show up to the bar and be like, here's some fancy ice for you. And they'd be like, no, I don't have, what are you, hey, get out of here. Right? So culturally, they weren't ready. So if I'd given up 2 years in, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you. So you have to have stick-to-itiveness. You have to be able to say, okay, here's where I am in the universe. Here's how it works. And so the earlier you start, the better it is. And just have belief that you can do it.
Yeah, that's really wonderful advice. What's next for Gläce Ice?
I think next for Gläce Ice is sort of it's the growth. It's the boomerang, the hockey stick that is in projections. I think we're going to bring in different partners of different sizes, and it's time for growth. It's time for bigger distribution. That may look, I think it may look like international franchises. I think it may look like co-distributing partnerships. We're working with a distributor partner here in Northern California that is going to add us sort of to their regular quote unquote bulk ice deliveries. We'd approach the traditional distributors early on. We thought, hey, you're already delivering. You want to add this to it? But again, talk about culture, right? The bosses were like, what, you're not booze. You don't need permitting. What, I don't want you on my truck. And I say, what do you care? Yes, you're right. I don't really need you, but you put me in your truck anyway. Here I am. Like, just add me to your list of stuff. And they were like, huh? Scratching their heads. I'm not sure. I don't know if that makes sense. But now those conversations, again, conversations that initially were very hard 15 years ago are now much more fluid. The phone rings a lot more today than it did when I first started. I was the only guy making phone calls, and now we're very fortunate to be the recipient of a lot of inquiries and a lot of folks who are suddenly that light bulb aura is a little bit brighter. I don't think through fault of my own, but definitely in credit to folks like you, to folks like that have taken editorial chances to include us in their storytelling, and we're eternally grateful for that because. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So,
yeah, 100%. Well, I'm so happy that you took some time, to be with us on Served Up. This is such an interesting topic. And I think that your journey is incredibly unique and will inspire so many, and definitely to check out Gläce Luxury Ice. It's
I appreciate
a game changer for drinks in general, right?
Thank you.
So.
We believe so. We believe that people love it. And, I will say this. I will say that in the 17 years of us being in business, no one's ever asked for a refund.
Wow.
So for whatever that means, there it is. And I want to say that that's because we don't overpromise, but we overdeliver.
Mm-hmm.
But there we are. That's our track record.
Well, congratulations. No one's ever said that on this show. That's for sure. That's amazing. You should have started off with that. That should be your tagline, actually.
Well, that's a tagline that's only good for another 24 hours. You never know. The next day, somebody's like, I'm going to punch a hole in this one.
That's amazing. Just amazing. Well, I want to just thank you so much for being on this show, Roberto. On behalf of the Served Up family, I want to wish you some great health and a lot of peace. And I really can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you always and forever. Congratulations on all your success. I love that you're surrounding yourself by the same team that you've had for many years. It makes me so happy. And I just want you to know, earlier today, I told the story of how fortunate I was just to have been in the right place at the right time so many years ago and crossed your path. I'm eternally grateful for what you've done. There's a handful of you who will be invited, if we ever do ring the bell, to stand next to me and ring it, because it's who brings you to the dance. So thank you so much for always thinking of me and the opportunity then and the space that you've given to consider this absolutely wild idea that still seems to be working.
Thank you, brother. Take care, man. Cheers to you.
Ciao, ciao.
Thanks for listening. Served Up is brought to you by Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. Produced by Zunu.online. Music by We Killed the Lion can be found on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to be notified of future Served Up episodes. Cheers!